The gentle hum of the library's air conditioning was a familiar backdrop to my daily life. Rows of shelves filled with neatly arranged books were my refuge, the place where I found solace in the quiet stories of others. I'd worked here for years, at a quaint little library in a town that time seemed to have forgotten. It was a simple life, one that suited me just fine, or so I thought. That was before Sam. He first appeared one rainy afternoon, dripping water onto the worn carpet as he stepped inside. I remember looking up from the return desk, his wet hair clinging to his forehead, his smile warm despite the miserable weather. "Do you have any recommendations?" he'd asked, shaking off the rain like a dog emerging from a bath. Something about him was different from the usual visitors. Most people who came here were elderly, seeking the comfort of nostalgia in books from their youth, or young parents trying to instill a love of reading in their children. But Sam, he was vibrant, full of energy that didn't quite match the sleepy atmosphere of the library. I felt my pulse quicken as I pointed him toward the classics. From that day on, he became a regular. We talked about books, about life, and before I knew it, those conversations spilled beyond the library's walls. Coffee dates turned into dinners, dinners into long walks under the stars. Sam was everything I didn't know I was missing: charming, attentive, and wonderfully unpredictable. He made me feel alive in ways that no book ever could. It wasn't long before he proposed, catching me completely off guard during a quiet evening stroll by the river. I said yes without hesitation, convinced that our love was the kind that only existed in novels. A whirlwind romance leading to a fairy tale ending. What could possibly go wrong? The first crack in the illusion appeared on the night I met his parents. Sam's family was old money, the kind that oozes sophistication and drips with subtle, cutting remarks. His mother, Victoria, eyed me with thinly veiled disdain the moment I stepped into their sprawling mansion. "So, you're the librarian," she said, her voice cool as ice. It wasn't a question, it was an assessment. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. It's a pleasure to meet you," I replied, forcing a smile. Her gaze flicked over me, as if she were inspecting a piece of furniture. Was all she said before turning away, dismissing me as easily as one would close a book they'd lost interest in. Dinner was worse. Every comment, every question was laced with judgment. They wanted to know why someone like me, a nobody from nowhere, thought she was good enough for their son. The prenuptial agreement was presented like an after-dinner mint, something to be expected, not questioned. Sam's father, Richard, handed it to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's just a formality, dear," he said, as if I should be grateful for the opportunity. Sam sat quietly beside me, his hand on mine, but his silence was deafening. The man who had once filled my life with laughter and light now seemed a stranger, complicit in his parents' cruelty. Yet, blinded by love, or perhaps by fear of losing him, I signed the document without protest. The wedding was a grand affair, though I barely remember any of it. It passed in a blur of white lace and forced smiles, the fairy tale already fraying at the edges. I thought I could make it work, that Sam and I could find happiness despite his parents' disapproval. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized I was living in a gilded cage, the weight of the prenuptial agreement a constant reminder of my place in their world. The man I had fallen in love with began to change. Sam's once warm affection grew cold, his words sharp. He was always busy, always with an excuse for why he couldn't spend time with me. The house, a gift from his parents, felt less like a home and more like a prison, with his mother's voice echoing in the hallways. Her presence felt even when she wasn't there. I spent more and more time at the library, escaping into the pages of books that offered worlds far kinder than my own. The life I had once known, the simple joys of a quiet existence, seemed a distant memory. I was no longer Anna the librarian, I was Anna, the unwanted wife, trapped in a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. And then, one day, everything changed. It was an ordinary morning at the library when I received the letter. The envelope was thick, made of expensive paper, with my name written in elegant script. Curious, I tore it open, my breath catching as I read the words inside. My great-aunt Eleanor had passed away. I barely remembered her, a distant relative who had lived a reclusive life in a sprawling estate somewhere upstate. We hadn't been close, our interactions limited to the occasional Christmas card or birthday greeting. But as I continued reading, the shock set in. She had left everything to me. The estate, the stocks, the bank accounts, altogether valued at $37 million. My hands trembled as I read the final lines, the lawyer's contact information provided for further arrangements. It didn't seem real, this sudden fortune thrust upon me from a relative I barely knew. But there it was, in black and white, a life-altering windfall that promised to change everything. When I told Sam, his reaction was immediate and chilling. He went from indifferent to enthusiastic in the span of a heartbeat, his eyes lighting up with a greed I hadn't seen before. "This is amazing, Anna," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "We can do so much with that kind of money. We should talk to my parents about how to manage it." His words made my stomach turn. This wasn't about us, this was about control, about his family sinking their claws deeper into me now that I had something they wanted. I realized then that I was no longer a burden to them, but an asset to be exploited. Over the next few days, Sam's parents became almost unbearably kind. Victoria, who had once barely acknowledged my existence, now called regularly, offering advice on how to best utilize my inheritance. Richard sent over financial planners, insisting I sit through endless meetings about investments and trusts. The house, once cold and empty, was now filled with their presence, their voices echoing off the walls as they discussed my money as if it were already theirs. But what they didn't know was that I had overheard a conversation between Sam and his parents one evening, a conversation that shattered any remaining illusions I had about their intentions. "Anna's inheritance is a golden opportunity," Victoria had said, her tone conspiratorial. "We need to ensure it stays within the family. You should consider having a child, Sam. It would tie her to us, make her more cooperative." My heart raced as I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear Sam's response. He didn't object, instead, he agreed. They were plotting to use me, to manipulate me into securing their hold on my fortune. The betrayal cut deep, the man I had once loved now nothing more than a puppet for his parents' greed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the weight of their deceit settled over me. I had been a fool, blind to the truth that had been staring me in the face for months. But now, with this newfound clarity, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called the lawyer. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations and quiet preparations. My lawyer, an astute woman named Rachel, was appalled by what I told her. She scrutinized the prenuptial agreement, her brow furrowing as she flipped through the pages. "This is airtight, Anna," she said, finally looking up at me. "It ensures that your assets are protected, but it also means they can't claim anything from your inheritance. You're in a stronger position than you think." Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves. I hadn't realized just how much power I held until now. For so long, I had been the silent victim, allowing myself to be trampled by Sam and his family. But this money, this unexpected windfall, had given me something more valuable than wealth. It had given me the means to escape. I began to plan my exit with meticulous care. Every day, I played the role of the dutiful wife, pretending to be oblivious to their schemes while secretly plotting my departure. I transferred the bulk of my inheritance into an untouchable trust, one that only I could access. I found a modest apartment in the city, far away from the suffocating grip of the Whitmores, and started packing my belongings little by little, careful not to arouse suspicion. The day I finally told Sam I was leaving was a day I'll never forget. We were sitting in the living room, his parents conspicuously absent for once, likely off planning their next move. Sam was sipping a glass of whiskey, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing within me. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision settle into my bones. "Sam, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. He looked up, surprised by my serious tone. "What is it, Anna?" "I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, and for a moment, Sam just stared at me, as if he hadn't heard correctly. Then, slowly, the realization dawned, and his expression darkened. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice cold, the warmth that once characterized our relationship now a distant memory. "Yes," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm done, Sam. I'm done being manipulated and controlled. I'm done with your parents treating me like I'm worthless. I'm taking my inheritance, and I'm leaving." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the gears turning in his mind, the shock giving way to anger. "You can't just leave," he snapped, his voice rising. "You're my wife, this is your home. We can work this out." I shook my head. "No, Sam. We can't. You and your parents only see me as a means to an end, not as a person. I deserve better than that, and I'm going to find it." For a moment, I thought he might try to stop me, that the man who had once professed to love me would resort to threats or violence to keep me in his life. But instead, he just sat there, seething, his pride wounded more than anything else. Without another word, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked out of that house with nothing but a suitcase and my dignity, leaving behind the life that had once seemed so perfect. The future was uncertain, and fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve, but I knew I was making the right choice. In the weeks that followed, the divorce proceedings moved quickly. The prenuptial agreement worked in my favor, just as Rachel had predicted. Sam and his family received nothing from my inheritance, their plans foiled by the very document they had once used to control me. As the dust settled, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I had the means to start over, to rebuild my life on my own terms. But I didn't want to just walk away from the pain and betrayal, I wanted to turn it into something meaningful. And so, with the help of my lawyer and financial advisors, I used a portion of my inheritance to establish a foundation for abused and mistreated women. The Anna Whitmore Shelter became a haven for those who had suffered like I had, offering them the support and resources they needed to reclaim their lives. In the end, I found my happy ending, not in the arms of a man, but in the strength and resilience I discovered within myself. I was no longer Anna the librarian, or Anna the unwanted wife. I was Anna, the woman who had taken back her life, and in doing so, had found a purpose that was far greater than anything I could have ever imagined. And as I stood in the doorway of the shelter, watching the women inside find hope and healing, I knew that my story was only just beginning. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.